There's a new episode of The Bad Batch that just came out, and it's called Cornered. I am here with my buddy, the Big Rob Theory, and we're going to talk about it.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the latest episode of The Bad Batch. I can't believe we're already on the 4th episode of this show. It kind of starts to happen so fast you don't even realize it. But yeah, this one's called Cornered, and in last week's episode we saw the Batch crash landed on a planet where majority of that episode was them kind of just having to fix their ship, get the electrical part that they needed to power the ship, and a lot of that, as far as the Bad Batch had to go, was really mainly on Omega and kind of seeing what she can do on her own, you know, when she doesn't really necessarily have the Batch with her, kind of showing her role in the group. And then on the flip side, we got to see kind of the transition into the Empire with the stormtroopers kind of starting to be implemented with Crosshair kind of training some of them. So they didn't touch on any of that in this episode. I was kind of curious to see if they would do that.
I was curious. I thought that they would have at least had Crosshairs like referenced, or at least in regards to that particular batch of clones or soldiers, whatever you want to call them, because they're not clones.
They're
not
yeah,
clones, so.
The new stormtroopers. Yeah, so like the first elite group of stormtroopers, at least that's what they're going for, the transition from the Republic to the Empire. But yeah, they didn't touch on that at all in this episode. So very curious about that. But this episode, we find our heroes on the planet of Pantora, and essentially they're going to find rations, different supplies that they need to move forward, because since they're not part of the Republic anymore, they don't really have the easy access to any of those things anymore. So yeah, this episode, they come down on Pantora. Omega super excited to kind of see this planet, and not too long into it, we're reintroduced to the character of Fennec Shand from The Mandalorian. Being able to see a much younger version of her was a lot cooler. We saw that in the trailer that she was going to be in it, played by Ming-Na Wen as well. Tons of little references to Star Wars Rebels in here, and Star Wars Resistance, which are two Star Wars shows that he hasn't gotten around to checking out just yet, but it was more like visual references, little things I was able to pick up on, but not too much, nothing that was ever like debilitating. I think if you haven't seen The Mandalorian, you probably wouldn't be so excited to see Fennec.
That's the reason I was like, oh wow, she's in this one. That's awesome. I mean, again, we did see in the trailer that she was going to be in it, but still, it is dope to see that character. And again, as he said, younger version. Like he was like, oh wow, and then I'm sitting there watching, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, that's awesome that she's in this. Especially seeing this version of her and seeing her interact with the Batch. I personally love this episode. I mean. I love it all, but I really love this episode too, because I do like the fact that the Batch has to kind of fend for themselves now. They've got to figure it out. I love it in TV shows, whether it's live action or animated, when things aren't really easy, because that's not how life is. Life isn't easy. So I like seeing how it wasn't easy for them, and they really do have to scrounge. So overall, I think the tone of this episode is pretty cool. I like the direction that they're going with the Bad Batch, and I'm curious for next week's episode.
Yeah, for sure. Seeing Fennec Shand be a part of the show, one thing right at the very end of the episode, I should also mention before I even talk about the end of the episode, that just the basic gist of this episode overall was that we find out that Omega kind of has a hit on her head, or, you know, that they're essentially sending out people like Fennec Shand, bounty hunters, to go in and seek out Omega. So we know now that the Bad Batch really has to protect Omega. Now, I've talked about this in previous episodes. The one thing I start to hope that they do with the rest of the show, start to differentiate it a little bit more from The Mandalorian, because at the end of the day, even though there's a Batch, people are already speculating that she may be force sensitive, Omega. You know, they all have their individual thing that they were genetically modified to be, and they kind of hinted in the last episode like what was her purpose, like what was the reason she was made, or I think it was 2 episodes ago that they talk about that. And I think it's pretty clear, like with some of her like kind of insight that she has in moments, kind of the feelings,
I thought about
that she might be force sensitive. And when you really look at it, it's like force sensitive kid that a group of like kind of hardened individuals are having to take care of, and with Grogu, exactly. Yeah. So I hope it starts to differentiate itself a little bit. I don't mind it. It's a common trope, right? Like the wanderer who comes across the kid who they're not really sure, like, kind of like at first it's kind of like, oh God, I have to take care of this kid. Kind of makes our lead hero kind of soften a little bit, and then they start to, become more attached to them over the course of time, almost like a father figure kind of thing. It works in The Mandalorian, and it's working here, don't get me wrong. But I do hope they differentiate it a little bit.
That's crazy that you referenced that, because I don't know what it was last episode when I watched it the first time. After I rewatched it, because I love rewatching things, especially before watching the new episodes. Kind of have to, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I kind of thought about that, and for some reason, just Grogu came to my mind. I don't know why. It was just like a subconscious connection, and then you're right. I kind of hope that they do deviate a little bit. I do like it. Don't get me wrong. Again, I love this show. It's just I want to see its own thing. I just want to see its own thing. Even if she happens to be force sensitive, I do want to see a little differentiation in how things are, how things come together. The whole hit thing. Same thing with Grogu. As he said, battle hardened guys. Mando. So it's still cool. I just, like I said, I want to see something completely different, for this, because this is its own thing.
For sure. I think that they definitely are leading on a fairly familiar thing that worked recently with Star Wars. You're like, all right, let's do something similar to that. Luckily, in this case, Omega is her own character. So with Grogu, he's just got the cuteness factor. Whereas Omega is cute at times, but she also is an interesting character. And she's essentially what Ahsoka and Ezra are for Clone Wars and Rebels. The young kid who's in there learning with the audience at times, and is like a bit naive and has to grow over the course of the show as they spend a lot of time with these much more experienced characters. And in last week's episode, it was really about her being able to like kind of take things on herself. And this week's episode, I think it was a lot more about like her kind of having to get over how naive she can be, you know what I mean? And how dangerous the galaxy is. So having to really come to terms with that. But beyond that, at the very end of the episode, like I mentioned, it ends with us finding out that Fennec Shand is talking to somebody, which of course we knew that she was given the hit by somebody. She mentions that the Bad Batch did get away, which did happen after a lot of really great action, really great chase sequence that I really enjoyed. The animation for this show is just top notch. Like it's crazy to see where the Clone Wars animation started versus like where it was by the end of the Clone Wars and where it is now.
Where this is, it's crazy.
So nice.
I love the animation of these shows, like the Clone Wars, and obviously I haven't really dove into Rebels yet or Resistance, but this is just not flawless. I can't say flawless because nothing's really flawless. In regards to the animation and the production of this animation, phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really top notch, crystal clear, very crisp. The lighting and everything about it. There's something about it that's just so nice. The final season of the Clone Wars and this top notch. Rebels has some of my favorite animation too, but that one has such a different animation style. So if you're really into the animation style of the Clone Wars, I think this is like the natural extension that just feels great. But on a technical level, this the episode is great as far as its visuals and its feel and its vibe, the music, the storytelling, the action was fast paced and fun to watch. I enjoyed all the little Easter eggs and references to things, other shows, if you guys are caught up with those other Star Wars shows. But if you're not, what I like about this show so far is that, if you've seen the Clone Wars, at least you can hop into this, because I told him he could probably do that.
What I did.
Yeah, exactly. So like right out of the gate, like I told him, there's obviously, if anybody who's been watching and watches all the shows, there's a huge connection to Rebels at the very beginning of the series. But luckily, up to this point now, it's mainly been like, okay, if you've at least seen the Clone Wars, you should be good. And so I'm hoping that you'll go and check out Rebels after all of this, which I know you will. But yeah, overall, enjoyed the episode. At the end, we see Fennec Shand is calling out to somebody. My guess is that it might be Darth Maul, because, he's probably dealing with everything with Crimson Dawn at this point. This is in between the events of Revenge of the Sith and Solo, a Star Wars story, which we do see him in. And of course, it's not after Rebels, so we definitely still have more time to kind of have on screen. So overall, thoroughly enjoyed the episode. Looking forward to next week's episode, seeing where they take things. I hope we get back to Crosshair and what's happening on that side of things, because I don't really know how long this series is supposed to be. Maybe they've already said how many episodes there's going to be, but yeah, I think it's a little bit longer than like some of these MCU shows that they've been releasing and The Mandalorian. So I am very curious to see what they end up doing with it. But yeah, as all of you guys, please comment your thoughts. Did you enjoy this episode? Did you not enjoy this episode? A big thanks to my guest, the Big Rob Theory, for being here in this video. We have actually filmed a couple videos while he's been here. So over the course of the next week or so, you guys will see his face here on the channel alongside me here in person quite a few times. But yeah, leave those comments down below. Hit the like button. The link to his channel is down below in the description box. Any final words on this episode, man?
No, I actually was thinking about the whole Crosshairs thing, and I know that it wasn't this episode, but I was looking forward to seeing a continuation of this because at the end of the last episode with Crosshairs, he seemed a little bit nostalgic, and I don't know, he just seemed like he was really thinking like, man, something's not right here. Something's not right with me. Yeah. Like, you know, like even though he was a little hardened before, and like, you know, and his inhibitor chip was the one that was working, if you will, he still seems a little on the fence, which I really like because I like Crosshairs a lot. A lot. I love Marksman in general, but Crosshairs is dope. So I'm looking forward to seeing, I really hope next week's episode, at least just a nod, something we can see about.
I mean, it's such an important part of the show. We got to be able to see more about it for sure.
And I know that this episode was more about building again with Omega and kind of getting her to not grow up. That sounds bad. I don't mean grow up because I love the whole innocence factor to her.
But it set the stakes for sure.
Yeah, like let her know, like, hey, you might want to be a little bit discernible. This guy might not be Mr. Happy-go-lucky, you know. So
exactly.
Just be a little more careful, and I like that. Yeah. So again, I'm really hoping to see that storyline unfold a little more. And maybe we can get a little insight into who Fennec Shand is actually working for.
But beyond that, yeah, I'm really excited. And yeah, you mentioned the Crosshair last week with him kind of almost looking a little bit remorseful. Like he's doing it because of his inhibitor chip, but almost a little bit remorseful. And one thing I'm definitely curious to see, because I mentioned in my review for last week's episode, is that, I don't know if you remember, it's like all those troopers, you know, they all had a personality. They had the helmet on, but then when they got back and they all went to their barracks, he's the only one that takes their helmet off. We never get to see how they feel about them all having killed those innocent refugees. So I really want to see what the new troopers are also thinking, you know, because they also saw somebody else who was kind of standing against Crosshair get shot right in front of them, you know, so.
And they were all just kind of like.
Exactly. So I want to see that transition and being able to see them implement the first steps of the stormtroopers and you know, kind of starting to transition from kind of this loyalty because of the clones being created to almost like this loyalty because of fear and because of money and because of like kind of just, you know, the different incentives that the Empire gives to their troopers. And we have seen that, you know, with things like Finn and various other shows now at this point, that whole stormtrooper rebellious kind of thing. So very curious to see if they touch on that or, you know, kind of what those early steps are. So yeah, guys, a big thanks once again to the Big Rob Theory for being here. We ramble tons enough here about this episode. Episode's called Cornered. Go check it out if you're a big Star Wars fan. I'd highly recommend this show altogether. Any final words, my friend?
Nothing. Thanks for joining us, guys. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
Until the next one.